lot more people joining us. Hope you're well. You're all familiar faces for the most part, right? You've been here before?
Yes.
Okay. No, not, this is your first year in the
First
school.
year, yeah.
Okay, so we'll go through everything. So welcome. For those of you that know me, my name is Korrol. I'm the principal of PS 101. Been here for this is starting my 21st year at this point, which is kind of crazy. And I've been in education for over 30 years, teaching everything from pre-K to 7th grade. Over the years, including clusters, which are specialties in technology and things of that nature. I say it every kind of year to parents. We're very fortunate to be in the school. It is a well-received school. It is a high-performing school, top in the district, recognized in the state, recognized in the country. We're a blue ribbon school, which means we've been recognized for excellence over the years. And we continue that path. I mean, our scores, when we talk scores largely and we're kind of being looked at, it's largely based on 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade in terms of how those students are performing on ELA and math, and of course, science, which is a 5th grade test. You'll get there in time. And that's kind of what they use as the preliminary rating. But overall, there are other quality metrics and markers in terms of how the students are behaving, what kind of protocols we have, what else we offer in this breadth of education that we get to offer for parents. And again, we're widely recognized for doing it all because our belief is that the more of a solid foundation we can create for your kids, the better chance they have at everything that will follow, be it in education, be it in life. So we work hard in preparing them academically, but also preparing them outside of the academics, in the arts, in terms of other qualities, in terms of leadership, in terms of social emotional, in terms of how to deal with other people, because as we all know, that's one of the biggest challenges that often come in life, right? It's not just, in your age, you're probably not doing math unless you're a math teacher, but you deal with people every single day. And understanding how to deal with other people, how to deal with confrontations, how to deal with conflicts, how to deal with differences of opinions. All of that has to kind of be woven into what we do. And it starts young. We started pre-kindergarten. We start talking about Leader in Me, and especially kindergarten, because we have these tenets for what makes people successful, which is based on the Leader in Me program is based on a book by Stephen Covey called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, came out in the 90s. And basically it just came from him interviewing thousands of people to find out what made them successful. And through that process, he found out that there's really 7 things that everybody did or had in some way that led to their success. So he wrote a book about it and kind of documented everything. And that's the program that we do is a children's version of it. It's the same 7 habits, but brought down to a child's level. What would that look like? And this is our 7th or 8th year doing this program. And the beauty is really seeing what the 5th graders look like, having had this program throughout their entire school and hearing the conversations they have and having to navigate challenges and difficulties with other people and school and creating goals for themselves. So all of that kind of gets fostered into what they do. To give you a frame, and again, most of you know this, but we're going to go through it anyway, a frame for the day is they have one teacher that is kind of their classroom. That'll stay that way for the most part until they go to middle school when they start going from class to class to class, if you remember that experience. But generally, they'll have one teacher for the entire day, and then they have specialty classes or clusters is what we call them. Gym, music, art, science, STEM, robotics, things of that nature. Just so you know, we have about 10 different clusters. Actually, no, it's not true. 8 different clusters because some of them are double, like we have 2 sciences and 2 gyms. So that means basically every class gets one of these per day. There's one day they get 2. So basically they're looking at 6 per week, yet there are 8 different programs. So they will not have every program every year. And basically they rotate through these different programs over the course of the years. Sometimes they'll have one thing multiple times. Sometimes they'll have it for a first experience, depending on how they're divided up into the following year's classes. What else can I talk about? I get questions around Orton Gillingham, which is our phonics program. Basically, it's a simple process. This is the oldest program basically that's been around that basically explains the rules for the English language. And you may notice your kids when they're doing homework, tapping, sounding out, touching their legs, doing things like this, because it's a total body program. In other words, learning can be done in different ways, but we all have different learning styles. So the beauty of the Orton Gillingham program, which started back in the 30s or 40s, so 1930s, 1940s, is really a full body experience, meaning you learn through action, you learn through motion. If you think about somebody learning piano. I could talk to you about how to play piano, but unless you're playing piano, you're not learning it. Language is the same experience. Language is a physical body experience. Just research wise, when we're talking to people, our words are only 10% of understanding. It's actually our physical body, our tonality, our communication that really helps people understand what your meaning is. So Orton Gillingham kind of brings that all in. Uh, and brings that all into the way kids learn. So right now, our goal from kindergarten through second grade is to teach kids to read. In other words, they have to learn to read. Welcome. They have to learn to read. What happens, and if you have older kids, but either way, you'll see it in 2 more years, is there's a major flip in third grade. So we move from learning to read to reading to learn, meaning they get a lot of literature and they're expected to learn and understand characters, why they do things the way they do. If you think about why do people talk about the importance of reading, the importance of reading is because you get to live other lives. You get to see other people, other characters making decisions that you may not have thought of, that you may not have made, and said, well, this doesn't make sense to me. Why would she do this in this way? And then you learn more about that character, that person's thinking, that person's decision making. That's what literature gives us. What it does is, in turn, it helps kids understand people beyond themselves. Because generally at this age, children are self-centered. They're egocentric. They are all about themselves. They see the world from their point of view. You're entering a period, which started last year, where they start to step out of themselves and see the world not how they see it, but maybe how mom sees it, or dad sees it, or their brother sees it, or sister sees it. So it gives them an opportunity to see things in a different way, which is what we want, because the more you can see things from other people's perspectives, the more you can understand how to relate to people as you get older. Personally, I think you're in a great time. I always remember, my daughter's 16 now, but I always remember that space from like 6 to 9 years old as being some of the best years. Not a baby anymore. They can do things on their own. Of course, they still need your support. They need you with them, but it's not that same kind of dependence as when they were 3 years old or 4 years old. Now they want to do more on their own. They understand how to relate to you almost like a little friend. You can have conversations with them, and they haven't hit the craziness of hormones and puberty. So you're in a really great space for the next 3 years, which means, honestly, use it wisely. It's a great opportunity to expose your child to different things. And that's what we try to do in 101. In other words, giving them exposure to different academics, different ways of doing academics, even math. I'm sure you've seen the math that we do, but it's how do I approach this problem in different ways? Because it gives them and broadens the way they're thinking. And that's ultimately what we want to do. Because the ultimate goal, if you think about it, is to prepare children for a world which we do not know. We all know about artificial intelligence. We know about technology's rapid development. What jobs will be there in 10 years, 15 years? I mean, your kids are 6 years old now, basically. So think about 15 years from now when they're 21, graduating college, what will the world be like? It's going to be a very, very different place. So how do we prepare them for that? And a large part of this is really about the way they're thinking and connecting with other people, how they learn, what they learn. Because right now they're like sponges, if you think about it that way. Meaning, when you take them on a trip, you take them to the park, you take them to a museum, they're taking it all in. Some people think, well, why bother taking a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old to on a vacation or to a museum? They're not going to remember it. They're not going to really understand it. It's all going in. It's all basically modifying the way they think. So the more experiences you can create for your children right now, the better developed they'll be later. They don't have to repeat it to you. They don't have to tell you they understand type of thing, but it's going in. And it'll all come together later in terms of pieces. I get questions about ICT classes versus general education classes. So just to clarify, there are 3 types of classes, well, 4 types of classes we have in school. So there's what's called the general education class, which basically is all those kids are roughly on level, meaning they're exactly or approximately where they're supposed to be. They have one teacher in front of them. Then you have what are called ICT classes, where 60% of the kids are above level, and the other 40% are about a year behind or a half a year behind. In the past, years and years ago, I don't know if you went to school or had this, where it was like a resource center or a resource teacher. Basically, somebody would come to your classroom, pull out a child and say, we're going to go practice reading. And they take them in a small group and teach them to read elsewhere. Then they bring them back to the class. The problem with this is if a person's doing this every single day, that child now just missed 5 periods or 6 periods of whatever is going on in the classroom. So we flip the model. Instead of pulling the children out, we push the teacher in. So now you get 2 teachers instead of one. So there's basically divide and conquer. They're there to support the kids who are a little behind and really help them up level. And they're also there to make sure the kids who are on and above level are going further faster. Just so you know, if you do have a child in ICT, I spoke when we first started this about 10 years ago, 11 years ago, maybe. I'd spoken to our 4th and 5th grade kids. I get feedback from the kids because it's their experience. I want to know what they're thinking. If they like ICT better or not, like what's their experience. And for the most part, kids who are generally bright like the ICTs better. Reason being, and their exact wording was, when I have one teacher, the teacher's paying attention to the kids who are lower functioning or who are behind, and I'm basically left to do my own work. So I don't get questions answered as what they were saying, or, go be a monitor or whatever else. So now they actually, with 2 teachers, have an opportunity to get pushed, to get answers, to get more attention, which is what they like. Then there's a special education self-contained class. These are kids who are basically 3 years or more behind, and they have a very small class of about 10 to 12 children, where it's really about kind of trying to catch them up to where they need to be. And lastly, our dual language class. Do any of you have kids in the dual language? Where basically that's specialized program. The challenge that those kids have is they're generally very good, but they're learning an entire another program on top of everything else they're expected to learn. So the kids who are in the dual language program really have to work a lot harder to keep up, because again, they have the same responsibility as all the other 1st grades. They have to learn everything that's there, plus they're learning Mandarin on top of it. So it's almost like it's not an accelerated program, but it's another layer of program, which can be a challenge for some kids. For the most part, they're good. And those kids tend to stay together as they go up the grades, which is a good thing and sometimes not so good, because it's nice to be exposed to other kids. So those are the different types of classes that we have. We are, as you probably know by now, a major technology school. It's something we've been noted for many, many years. We first started our one-to-one program, meaning that everybody had their own laptop back in 2009. So it was quite some time ago, which is also why when the pandemic hit, it didn't really affect us that much. It was just, okay, open your laptops at home instead of here. Which is why when you heard about the city's scores declining and everything went down, we didn't. Not only did we not decline, we went up, because of the fact, again, that technology is something we use as our everyday. And that at this point, just so you know, is something we're looking at as our next level, of course, comes to artificial intelligence. What does this look like in education? How do we use it? Unfortunately, many people, and you probably do this too to some extent, we'll just take a problem, dump it into ChatGPT, get their answer, turn it in. And that's not what we want our kids to do. We want our kids to use the technology as a tool to help them go faster, but not to replace their intellect. In a recent conversation with 5th grade, I was talking to them about, and I said, basically, it's similar to as if you've never used your legs. If you don't walk around, what's going to happen to your legs? They're going to get tired, they're going to get fatigued, and ultimately you wouldn't be able to walk. Well, if you're using AI and not thinking, what's going to happen to your brain over time? And they got it, they understood. So right now, as a school, our focus is really using artificial intelligence to support the staff. We just started this at the end of last year, where basically this year, every grade is going to be picking some form of AI that they're going to be using to help their pedagogy, their teaching, to help them reach kids more individually, to be more connected with kids, to help their teaching and learning. And in the older grades, and in some instances by mid-year, we'll be instructing kids, talking to them about it, talking to them about how to use it, giving them ideas, because really, if you're familiar with artificial intelligence, whether it's ChatGPT or any other Gemini or Perplexity or any of these programs, really what matters are the prompts that you're giving. The questions you're asking will greatly drive the response you get. You can ask one question, change one word in that question, and get a completely different directed answer. So obviously, we have to teach kids how to think and ask better questions so that they can use the tools properly for their education. Does it make sense? And again, we're figuring it out as we go too. I know the city, the chancellor just recently on Monday, when she had our State of the School address, talked about artificial intelligence in the Department of Education and how they're first starting to kind of build it. I can tell you we're pretty much ahead of most schools in terms of the way we've started using it, but we have a long road to go. The other challenge is it's constantly evolving very quickly. So it's like chasing after something that's running. So we're trying to figure out how to use it best for our staff and eventually for our kids. Safety. So Safety, we are very big on safety. As you probably know by now, we have a security officer downstairs. The door is locked. There's a camera out front. You have to ring the bell to kind of come in. All our other doors are locked and alarmed. We have cameras pretty much all over the building. So safety is huge here. As part of that, we have to run a certain amount of fire drills or evacuation drills, meaning getting the kids out of the building in a certain amount of time. And with 1,150 kids and about 125 staff members, we get everybody out in about 4 minutes, which is pretty good. And then we have what are called lockdown drills, which we're actually having one today, shortly after this meeting ends, where it's practicing for, unfortunately, what we've heard about in the news with instances with people entering the building, making sure our kids are safe. And there are different types of lockdowns. You'll always get notified after a lockdown, meaning there'll be a blast on the website. We had a lockdown drill today, just so you know. Other times we've had lockdowns for different reasons. And then again, there's degrees of lockdowns. How many of you remember a couple of years ago when there was a house, I think on 35th, that just exploded, right? That happened at like 7:30, 7:40 in the morning. We had morning arrival. We had to quickly shift all of our arrival processes. But once we got in, we went into a lockdown mode, and a specific type of lockdown where basically nobody was allowed in or out of the building. Everything inside the building functioned normal, but nobody was allowed in or out. We've had other situations where we've heard about, some robbery or something happening on 86th Street. Again, it's not here, but we'll enter a lockdown just to make sure there's no issues. Nobody's coming in, nobody's coming out. But in our building, we function completely normal. The soft lockdowns that we enter, which we'll be doing today, these are the ones where the kids learn to hide. They basically find a spot in the room that's not accessible by the windows, and they hide there so that they're not in plain sight if, God forbid, anything ever happened. So let's talk about education and what first grade kind of looks like, because first grade is a big transition from kindergarten for a lot of our students. In kindergarten, we allow them time to play, they're centers. It's a very different vibe to first grade, where they're now sitting at their desk basically all day long. Aside from, of course, getting up for movement and other activities, it's not a play type of thing, it's more of an academic. First grade is where most kids have a big shift, meaning either they get it and they go with it, or they don't get it, they resist it, and it becomes a challenge for a lot of students because they can't sit that long, or they don't have the energy or stamina to keep up academically. We do start slow. We make sure the beginning of first grade, the first few months, is taken slow. And I talked to you about this last year, but our philosophy is take it easy. Take it easy on the kids, make sure they feel confident, assess what they know, try to make sure they're in a place where they're getting used to this type of rigor in academic. Then what happens, and this happens by mid-year, December, especially January, is we start kicking into high gear. Now we start loading them with a lot of work, a lot more challenge, a lot more complexity. So you'll probably notice when you get your first report card, you may go, yay, this looks good. Then you get your second report card, you're like, what happened? And that's because the challenge has come, where it's become a lot more challenging for kids. Again, we have all levels. Some kids, no problem, they just go with the flow. Other kids tend to resist. But what we do find is by the last report card, after they deal with that initial challenge of learning, then they start getting used to it. Of course, we support them, we help them, and then over time, they get used to it, and then they're fine by the end of the year. But again, this is our methodology every year. We take it easy in the beginning, slow ramp up, and then we start really hitting hard with academics. Just so you know that kind of vibe. Yes.
So one question. So I noticed that there is after school program for second grade and up.
Mhm.
So when the when the academic complexity comes in,
Mhm.
what would you do to support them
In second grade or first grade?
first?
In first grade, really the big thing we ask is of parents, because remembering a lot of kids, especially if they're having challenges, they're sitting for 6 hours during the day. It's a lot. I know a lot of parents want after school, but you're now adding another hour and a half, 2 hours to that frustration, which can be counterproductive. What I say is, honestly, to most people is bring them home, let them play, give them a little time to relax, then get them into their work and sit with them and support them. One of the programs we have is iReady, I'm sure you're familiar with, but that's an academic program that actually develops with the child. So in other words, they take they get a question. If they get it right, they'll get a second question on a similar level. If they get it right, the program gets harder. They'll get a question. If they get it right, it'll continue. If they get it wrong, now it'll stay. and that'll basically figure out their level. So the more they're doing programs like iReady, and we have other programs that you have access to, the better it's going to help them. The other thing you can do as parents, and honestly, it's the most important thing, is talk to your children all the time. Talk to them, read to them, dare I say, let them watch TV. The more they're exposed to language, the better it is. If you think about it, even as you're listening to me now, we as people use so many more words. Understand so many more words than we'll ever use. So the language is going in. The more you could talk to them, the more you can, even when you're walking down the street, if you see a billboard, you see a sign, what does that say? What does that say? Help them read. The more they're exposed to language, the more it's going to expand their understanding. Because ultimately, that's the biggest challenge. It's that piece of access. It's like math, for example. Once you understand how to count, once you understand how to add, you don't forget that. You don't unlearn it. So it becomes another level. The same is true with reading and literacy. Once you start hearing words repeated, once you start understanding how to ask for things in different ways, how to understand what a question is asking of you, then you don't forget that. It develops your brain. So the more you can support them with language and conversation and experience, it's the best thing you can do for them. In second grade and up, well, we have two types of after-school programs, so a few actually. But there's the BCA program, which started this year, which is a brand new program. We don't run that. That's run by a separate program using our building. That already began, where it's basically 20 kids in each grade. Our academic program starts in second grade and tends to target a middle of the road group, meaning if the child is well below, they're getting different types of support in school. If the child is doing really well, they don't need the help. There's a specific range of child who is like, they're almost there, but they need a little more bump. And that's what the after school targets for those kids who are kind of falling in that range. And that's basically teacher selected based on their academic performance. And that changes every year. Last year, I think we started 3 through 5, and then we were able to add second grade. This year, we started from second grade forward. We generally do not do lower in terms of that. But again, to answer your question, the more you can kind of support them with discussion, with reading to you. And I get this question around, well, what if you can't read English or you're not great with English? Doesn't matter. Have your child read to you. I know many, many parents and friends, I'm speaking of personal friends, who they came from another country, mother or dad didn't speak English, child's learning English, parent would still say, read to me. And the parent would try to learn through their child and make them the teacher. But the point is, it showed the importance of academics, the importance of reading. Remember, it's not necessarily about what you know versus what they know. It's more so about showing them how important academics and pushing yourself is. That if you don't understand something, you don't just go, okay, that you try and figure it out, that you work on it, that you know how to ask for support. Especially with today technology, it's easy to go into a computer and basically ask for support or help. And I don't know if you know, with ChatGPT, for example, you can give a prompt of teach me how to do addition of double numbers, and it's not just going to give you the answer, it'll take you step by step and actually teach you. So it's actually developed a teaching model too, which is very beneficial. Another program that you may want to look into, what's the name of it? I think it's like Synergy or something. It's from Elon Musk, but basically it's a math program. Some of our teachers' kids have used it. And basically it's an online tutorial. It's twofold, where they get tutored by themselves, meaning through AI, and then they have group projects with kids around the world. And at the end of every week, the parent actually gets a report of feedback of how your child did over the week. What kind of problems did they solve? How did they communicate with others? How did they participate? And you get weekly reports on that. So using AI in a way that supports education can be very beneficial. A lot of parents ask about how much is too much with technology. And the answer is ever changing. Because really, they shouldn't be on a screen all the time. Too much is not good. How do you know it's too much? It's too much when your child fights you when you say it's time's up. That's a problem. If they start screaming or fighting or throwing a tantrum when you're taking away their phone or iPad or whatever else, that's how you know they're addicted, they've gone too far. If they go, okay, time's up, and they get it, or they say, even if they say, 5 more minutes, that's not the same as crying or getting upset. So point is, that's the barrier for technology, but you can also encourage them to use tech in a way that supports their learning and supports their education. There's so much stuff out there. The challenge for parents is sorting through what's good and what's garbage, for lack of better words. Other questions about 101 or the school you may have?
I know you mentioned that we have one teacher that teaches besides the clusters, but my daughter mentioned that she gets a different teacher that teaches her math in her class. I just wanted to clarify why that's happening.
Yes, so one of the things we did is this year we have coaches on every single grade, first through fifth, not kindergarten. So basically, it's an out-of-classroom teacher who used to be in the classroom. They're the grade leader and coach for that class, meaning their job is partially to work with students in small groups and also to work with teachers on giving teachers feedback to make them better at what they're doing. So yeah, on first grade, you will have Ms. Herbert comes in and she'll work with, I think there's 2 general ed classes that she works with, where she'll work with a small group of kids. And that could be, well, these are the high-end kids and they need to be pushed, or it could be the opposite. They just need a little more support. So that's where they're coming in for a period or 2 a day. It was something we were able to implement. We find that with, 30 kids, the more teachers you can get in there, the better. But I'm sure you've heard about the class size reduction piece, just to quickly address that. So that's a 5-year, 6-year plan that's happening over time. We only have a few classes that are at that new class size limit. Just so you know, the class size limit for kindergarten through 3rd grade is 20 students per class. And for 4th grade through, I think it's 8th grade, is 23 kids per class. That's an ongoing process that's going to take time. If your child's in dual language, by the way, that'll never happen, because dual language, gifted and talented, those programs are excluded because there are so few of them, they can't limit those programs. So over time, hopefully, you'll start seeing lower numbers in your child's classes, and then we won't have the need for pushing more teachers in, although ICT classes will still exist in the same capacity. Other questions you have? Okay. And I've said this to you before, I think last year, but I'll say it again because it's worth saying, remembering that your child that you send to school is not the same child you have at home. Meaning we act differently in different situations, in different places, how we behave. Think for yourself, how you act when you're at home or relaxing or hanging out with your family is going to look very different than when you're at work. It's just we present ourselves in different ways, and kids are no different. How they present at home, and they should be hopefully a little energetic and wild and talkative or whatever else, may look very different in a school building where they're more quiet or reserved or shy, and act differently here. It's just something to know, and I always pre-frame it because of the fact that sometimes parents are like, I don't understand, my child is this way at home, how can they be this way at school? We get a different version of a child because at home they're getting a very different kind of attention and freedom that they do in a classroom. In a classroom, you're surrounded by 20 to 30 children. You don't know. Sometimes kids are very nervous. My daughter, for example, is very talkative at home. She always has been. But in school, completely quiet, shuts down, gets very uncomfortable around this many people. And, when she's asked questions and so forth, it wasn't until actually last year, it was the first year on parent-teacher conference, that I didn't have a teacher telling me she doesn't talk. So it took until she was 15, basically, to start coming at it for a show. So my point being, however your child is showing up in school, a lot of times we look at our kids and we say, well, their cousin, my brother's kid, or is very different, or my friend's children is acting very different, or why does this child seem to be so talkative and you're so quiet? And when we do that, we're kind of putting our child down because they don't know how to deal with it. Remembering that children grow at different paces, and sometimes things just come together later. Again, to my point, they're absorbing everything you're sharing with them. They're absorbing everything you're experiencing them too. But when they're ready, they'll do it. The analogy I often use is like a flower blooming. You can't force a flower to grow. It's got to grow on its own. What you can do is set up the surroundings. You can make sure the soil is nutritious and great. You can make sure it gets sunlight or the direct amount it's supposed to. You can make sure it has enough water, which looks different for different plants, right? Some plants need to be watered every day. Some plants need to be watered once a week. So you have to think about what it is your child needs to support them to get where you want them to go. And part of that growth process is really about you as a parent deciding who you need to be to model what you want them to see. So for example, you can't be a parent that eats crappy food and terribly and then tells your child to eat their vegetables. It's not going to work. They have to watch you do things, take it as the norm, and then they will copy, especially at this age. And that's why I said earlier, they're sponges. They will watch and copy you all the time. And I saw it as a teacher too. As a teacher, when you're teaching, they will start modeling your language patterns, your movements, and everything else tremendously with their parents. And especially whichever parent, because the reality is if there's 2 parents in the home, usually there's one of those parents that we kind of are closer to or want more attention from. that's the parent that they're gonna kind of model. So whatever your situation is at home, if it's just you, if you're with a partner, think about which parent your child gravitates towards more. And that parent, both parents need to, but that parent specifically needs to kind of step up and showing, well, I want my child to be healthy. I want them to see exercise as a part of life. So I'm going to make sure I'm exercising in front of them at least a couple of times a week so they see that as the norm. You know, if you want your child to read more and they never see you reading, they're not going to read more. If you tell them to get off your phone while you're holding your phone, it's not going to work. You have to think about what you want your child to be and do and become, and then emulate those behaviors because that's what they're going to do. They're going to model you more than anybody else in this life, especially for the first 10 to 12 years before they really start kind of getting pulled by their friends and peers. Any questions about that? No? Okay. Yeah, and that's the other thing is just lastly is to think about habits, routines, what you want your child's structure to be. And I'm pretty sure I've said this before, but either way, it's like with my daughter, one of the things we did, always brought her home, gave her snack, gave her a few minutes to calm down, relax, just unwind, and then it was down to homework. In the beginning, kindergarten, first grade, it was tough for us as parents, meaning they'd have what would be take me 2 minutes to do, probably take you 2 minutes to do of homework, writing out letters or adding some numbers, but for them it takes 45 minutes. And it's frustrating to sit there as a parent with them sometimes. But that habit of come home and snack, take a little time for yourself, now do your work. If you're consistent with that pattern, it's going to save you a lot of headache later on. Again, my daughter, 16, because we did that so much when she was younger, it's still her pattern. She doesn't really know otherwise. Maybe she takes a little more time when she gets home to relax and chill out, but it's the same thing. I don't have to bother her about homework. I don't have to ask her about homework. She does it. She does it on her own. It's become part of her routine. That pattern is created now. And I know as a parent of a 6-year-old, of a 5-year-old, and maybe even at the beginning of second grade, it's tough because you have to make time to sit there with them and work with them and push them. But if you invest the time and energy now, the rewards and benefits will be huge later. So just a suggestion to you, because again, I could tell you as a parent, and I'm thinking back to third, fourth, fifth grade, it's a blessing not to have to sit there and go, did you do your homework every day? Just knowing it's done. I don't have to worry about her. And you know, as parents, that's the one thing we do worry about all the time is our children constantly. So imagine you had less worry in your life, how that would help you, you know? So creating these patterns now, investing in your time and energy into them now is going to pay off greatly. I will tell you, kindergarten, we had to sit with her every single day. Beginning of first grade, sitting with her every single day. By mid first grade is when we would start saying, I'm in the room, but you work at the table. You do your own thing. If you need help, I'll check it after. If you don't know, try it. So we were still in the vicinity, still in the room, but not on top of her. By second grade, she was almost autonomous. We were still around, but I didn't need to stay in that room. We could go do other things and still she was doing her work. So these 2 years, K and 1, very important for habit creation. You know, and just thinking about what you want the experience to be like. But if I can give you one thing to leave with here today, it's really about communication, language, and time. As much time as you can with them. And some parents have trouble with this because they've worked very hard. They're working all day. They don't get home till late. Remember, it's quality versus quantity. You can have a half an hour with your child and really be with them and really be present with them. And that's worth more than a parent who's with them for 5, 6 hours and not paying attention to them. So, or think about your moments with people that you love or people you care about. You have memories of certain moments because you had intense time with them. You had a connection with them. It wasn't about how much they were there or how much time they were there. It was about what you did with them when they're there. So if you can create time every day to sit and read with your child, even a half an hour, just have conversations. Again, it's not how is school today because they're going to go, good. That's not what we want to do. We want to create better questions. What was something fun that happened in school today? What was something you learned today that was challenging? What's something that made you laugh in school? Did somebody do something funny? The more you ask them questions, the more it forces them to tell you the story. And when they're telling you the story, they're practicing their talking skills, which is what you want. Because we're very much as people in our own heads, the more we can learn to communicate to others and say what we need and ask for what we need, the more developed we become over time. So time with your child is essential. And again, it doesn't have to be 4 or 5 hours. It could be even 15 minutes of just real connected time, not in a phone. I'm here with you right now, that kind of thing. Any questions for me? Okay. Well, thank you guys for coming in. Obviously, we're gonna have this every single year, second grade, but we will have other kind of interactions later this year, whether it's on parenting, whether it's on technology. So I do hope you'll have the opportunity to join us. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yep. And I'll hang around if you have any questions.